The funeral home smelled like lilies and old wood. I stood near the casket, staring at my father's pale hands folded across his chest. He looked smaller than I remembered. People whispered behind me, their voices blending into a low hum I couldn't understand. My aunt touched my shoulder gently. I nodded without looking at her. Dad had been sick for 8 months. I watched him fade slowly, like ink bleeding into water. But standing here now, I still wasn't ready. The room felt too crowded, too warm. I tugged at my black tie and took a deep breath. Then I heard my Uncle Blake's voice cutting through the crowd, loud and certain. He was talking to someone near the back, gesturing with his hands. I couldn't hear the words yet, but something about his tone made my stomach tighten. I turned slightly and saw him laughing, at my father's funeral. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my revenge story from. I want to know how far it has traveled. After the service, everyone gathered at our house. My mother had passed away 3 years earlier, so it was just me now. People brought casseroles and pies I wouldn't eat. They hugged me and said things like, "He's in a better place," or "Stay strong." I smiled and thanked them, but the words felt hollow. Uncle Blake arrived late with his wife, Fiona. She wore sunglasses indoors and carried a designer purse. Blake wore a suit that looked too expensive for the occasion. He clapped me on the back like we were old friends. "Tough day, kid," he said. I wasn't a kid, I was 26, but Blake always talked to me like I was still 12. He moved through the house like he owned it, shaking hands, laughing too loud. I watched him from the kitchen, holding a glass of water I didn't drink. Something felt wrong. Then he stood in the center of the living room and cleared his throat. "I have everyone's attention," Blake said, raising his voice. The room quieted. People turned to face him. I stayed in the doorway, half hidden. "I know today is hard," he continued. "My brother was a great man. He built a business from nothing. And now, as his partner, I'll make sure his legacy continues." I froze. Partner? My father owned a small construction company. He'd built it alone, worked every job himself until it grew. Blake helped out sometimes, but he was never a partner. I stepped forward. "What are you talking about?" I asked. Blake smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Your dad and I had an agreement, kid. The business is half mine, always has been." My throat tightened. "That's not true," he shrugged. "It's complicated, we'll talk about it later." People shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. Blake smiled again and changed the subject, but I couldn't hear anything else. My hands were shaking. After everyone left, I sat alone in the living room. The house felt too big and too quiet. Blake's words echoed in my head. "Partner, agreement, half mine." I stood up and walked to my father's office. It was a small room at the back of the house, filled with filing cabinets and stacks of papers. Dad wasn't organized, but he kept everything. I opened the first drawer and started digging. There were invoices, receipts, contracts, nothing about Blake. I checked the second drawer, then the third. My chest felt tight. What if Blake was telling the truth? What if there really was some agreement I didn't know about? Then I found a folder at the very bottom of the last drawer. It was labeled Blake in my father's handwriting. I pulled it out slowly and sat down at the desk. My hands were trembling as I opened it. Inside were papers, lots of them. The first was a handwritten letter from my father. The letter was dated 6 months ago, right after Dad's diagnosis. It started with my name. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. I need you to know the truth about Blake." I swallowed hard and kept reading. "Your uncle has been stealing from the company for years. Small amounts at first, then bigger. I confronted him twice. Both times he promised to stop. He didn't, I have proof. Bank transfers, fake invoices, forged signatures. He thinks I'm too sick to notice. He's wrong." My heart pounded. I flipped through the rest of the folder. Bank statements with highlighted transactions, invoices for jobs that never happened, emails where Blake asked vendors to lie about payments. Everything was dated, organized, labeled. My father had built a case. He knew exactly what Blake was doing, and he left it all for me. At the bottom of the folder was a note. "Don't let him take what we built." I didn't sleep that night. I read every page in the folder 3 times. The numbers were clear. Blake had stolen over $200,000. He'd been careful, spreading it out over 5 years, but my father had noticed. He'd tracked every transaction, saved every email. I felt anger rising in my chest, hot and sharp. Blake had smiled at the funeral. He'd called himself a partner. And all along he was a thief. The next morning I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table. The folder was in front of me. I thought about calling the police, but something stopped me. Blake wasn't stupid. He'd have a story ready, some excuse. And without my father here to testify, it would be my word against his. I needed a better plan. I needed to make him confess. I picked up my phone and texted Blake. "We need to talk about the business." Blake responded immediately. Come by the office tomorrow, 10 a.m. I stared at the message. The office, my father's office. Blake was already acting like it belonged to him. I texted back, I'll be there. The next morning I put on a suit and tucked the folder into my briefcase. My hands were steady now. I wasn't scared anymore. I was ready. The office was a small building on the edge of town. My father's name was still on the sign outside. I parked and sat in the car for a moment, breathing slowly. Then I grabbed the briefcase and walked inside. Blake was sitting at my father's desk. He had his feet up, a coffee mug in his hand. He smiled when he saw me. Morning, kid, have a seat. I stayed standing. We need to talk about what you said at the funeral. Blake nodded. Right, the business. Look, I know it's a lot to process. Blake leaned back in the chair like he had all the time in the world. Your dad and I started this company together. It was always 50-50. He just kept it quiet because of taxes, legal stuff, you understand. I crossed my arms. Show me the paperwork. He blinked. What? If you're partners, there's paperwork, contracts, show me. Blake's smile faded slightly. It wasn't formal, it was a handshake deal. Brothers, you know, we trusted each other. I nodded slowly. So there's nothing in writing? Not exactly, but then how do I know it's true? Blake stood up, his tone shifting. You calling me a liar? I met his eyes. I'm asking for proof. The room felt smaller suddenly. Blake's jaw tightened. He walked around the desk, closer to me. Listen, kid, I don't need to prove anything. Your dad's gone. I'm the one who knows how this business runs. Without me, it falls apart. I opened my briefcase slowly. Blake watched, his eyes narrowing. I pulled out the folder and held it up. What's that? He asked. Proof, I said quietly. His face changed. Just for a second, I saw fear flicker across his expression. Then he laughed, loud and forced. Proof of what? That your dad was disorganized? Yeah, I know, that's why I helped him. I opened the folder and pulled out the first bank statement. This is from March 2020. A transfer of $15,000 from the company account to your personal account, for a job that never existed. Blake's smile disappeared. I don't know what you're talking about. I pulled out another page. June 2021, 12,000, another fake invoice. His face went red. Your dad approved those payments. Did he? I asked. Because I have emails where you told the vendor to backdate the invoice. Blake stepped closer, his voice low. You don't know what you're doing. I didn't move. I know exactly what I'm doing. You've been stealing from my father for 5 years. $200,000. He knew, he documented everything. Blake's hands curled into fists. That's not stealing. I worked for that money. Your dad owed me. Owed you for what? He pointed at me, his finger shaking. For keeping this place running while he got sick, for covering his mistakes, for putting up with his stubbornness. I shook my head. You stole from him while he was dying. Blake's face twisted. You're just a kid, you don't understand business. I understand theft. For a moment we just stared at each other. Then Blake turned away, running a hand through his hair. What do you want? He muttered. I want you to admit what you did. He laughed bitterly. And then what? You call the cops, ruin the family name. Maybe. Blake turned back to me, his expression cold. You won't. Blake sat down again, trying to regain control. Look, we can work this out. Business partners argue all the time. Let's just split everything 50-50 and move on. I shook my head. You're not my partner, you're a thief. His eyes went dark. Careful, kid. My name is Kyle, I said, and this company belongs to me. Blake stood up fast, his chair scraping the floor. Your dad built this with my help. You were off at college while I was here, sweating in the sun, fixing his screw-ups. Funny, I said, because these bank statements show you sitting at home while Dad worked 12-hour days. Blake slammed his hand on the desk. I don't have to listen to this. Yes, you do. I pulled out another document. This is a contract my father signed 3 years ago. It names me as the sole heir to the business. Notarized, legal, binding. Blake's face went pale. That's not possible.